The Storm Coaster is one of the latest and greatest thrill rides to make its debut in the United Arab Emirates, opening up at the Dubai Hills Mall in 2022. It's Intamin's prototype vertical launch coaster and actually takes the record for the world's fastest vertical launch. Not that there's too many vertical launch coasters out there, but it's still pretty cool. This thing is completely enclosed in this massive building that the ride was designed in from the start. It stands 164 feet tall and they managed to pack in 2,198 feet of track. The layout of this ride can really be defined by these multiple layers of track sections lining the outer edges of the building, allowing for one big support piece in the center. The ride is the building. Structurally, it's extremely complicated because they have supports for the track built into the side of the walls. So where you would normally build footers in the ground to allow for bracing due to the excess force, now the building is absorbing all that force. So as a result, the ride can't be too extreme. I feel like it really rides the line of family thrill because it does feature two inversions, both of them dive loops, but the actual speed isn't too fast. You go less than 50 miles per hour. Part of that is also because if you went any faster, the ride would be over really quickly. So they had to kind of draw it out. And you know what it really reminds me of? A smaller version of that polar coaster concept. You remember when this was originally announced for Orlando, set to be the world's tallest roller coaster? It was supposed to be an Intamin product and it actually shared a lot of similarities to what this has. A vertical launch, and then once you rise to the top, a series of elements slowly winding its way down. It's like, how can you do a helix around a building without actually being a helix? Because, helixes are boring. They're trying not to do what Chance did with their toboggans. Quite literally, helix your way down to the bottom. So instead, they incorporated these funky outer banks, weird airtime pops, inversions, anything to add diversity to this layout. For that reason, we said it reminded us of a more extreme Eurosat Can-Can coaster. If you're unfamiliar, that's a Mock Rides family coaster at Europa Park in Germany. Completely indoors in the dark, lots of winding helices inside this giant golf ball, but still manages to keep things interesting. And I think what Intamin came up with here was pretty cool. So let's dive into the Storm Coaster's ride experience. Now, first thing you gotta know is that this ride is located at a mall. So as you're driving up, visitors can see this thing from like miles away. And of course, as you can see, it has this amazing light package. So the ride looks cool from the inside and the out. It's pretty incredible the design that they came up with here. As with all of the malls in Dubai, there is free parking. You'll take an escalator up and then pretty much wander around until you find the entrance. The Storm Coaster is set up like the same way that you'd walk into a store. It's not attached to a theme park. You just walk in. So there's a counter there where you can get your tickets. This ride, just fair warning, is expensive. But they do offer tiered pricing, so depending on how many rides you want to get, the price per ride goes down the more you buy. But they really only have it set up with the assumption that you won't buy more than 3 rides. There's no unlimited ticket option. For one ride on any row except the front row is $18 US. For one ride in the front row, you'll have to pay $22. Now, if you want 2 rides, it's $27, so only $5 more than one front row ride. If you want 3 rides, which is the package we did, you're paying $41 US. But that does include one ride in the front row. So we were like, all right, cool, we'll try it once in the front and then do our other rides in the back. Unfortunately for us, the entire back car was out of commission when we went, and we didn't know that when we were buying our tickets. So as you can imagine, we were not too thrilled. So for my 3 rides, I rode in rows 3, 2, and 1. Now the last thing I'll add about the pricing is they do offer a fast track option, but please do not get it. You'll be wasting your money. You aren't gonna need it. I think this ride is overpriced, and so not too many people pay to do it. When we went, we were some of the only guests there. We walked up to the entrance and were immediately deposited in a pre-show. In this room, you'll see screens all around you, and it's like you're in an elevator. They take you up to the top of this overlook where you can see all of Dubai. And then a storm comes, and it's like you're just looking at it from afar, but then it gets closer and closer, and it's upgraded to a level 4 storm, which is basically a tornado. It's very serious. It causes a complete mechanical failure, and then you fall all the way back down to the ground, but luckily the brakes engage just in time, and then you gotta get out of there. And so you're gonna board your storm jets to launch into the eye of the storm, and that's how you escape. So it's kind of a fun theme. I think it's hilarious that a storm theme exists for a ride in a country that rarely ever gets rain. Go figure. Now this station is very cool looking, not because it's themed, but because it's the only way you can see the ride itself. I guess there is technically an observation deck, but the viewing area kinda sucks. I feel like it's a missed opportunity to not have a viewing area that allows you to see the vertical launch. Like, that is their main advertising point, and you can't see it unless you're riding it. But at least it's still a cool reveal once you enter the station. They do have some lockers off to the side. That's where you can put all your loose items. And if you purchase the option that gives you multiple rides on the roller coaster, you have to do them consecutively. So you don't go through the pre-show more than once. Once the restraints pop up, you have priority and you sit where you want, even if you're taking the row of someone else who's lined up to ride. So for instance, after our first ride, it was time for us to do our front row ride, but there was someone queuing up to do the front, but it didn't matter. We were already on the train, so they told us, no, take the front row, even if it meant the people in line had to wait another train. It was very strange. Now, these trains are super nice. If you've done another newer Intamin launch coaster, it's set up almost identically. You have an over-the-shoulder lap bar, no seatbelt, and a total of 12 passengers per vehicle. So now it's time to ride. You roll out of the station, take a left-handed dip underneath a maintenance walkway, and start into that vertical launch. And this is a very controlled ascent up to the top. It feels like you maintain one speed the whole time, so there's not really any kick to it. It doesn't feel like it keeps getting faster and faster. I had done a vertical launch coaster before, Wicked at Lagoon in Utah, and that launch definitely feels punchier. Probably because that starts accelerating on level ground and then takes you up into the vertical launch, and this just doesn't feel like that at all. So I think overall I do prefer the launch on Wicked because this did underwhelm me a little bit. But I guess it's still better than a vertical lift hill, so I'll take it. When you reach the top, you crest over. This is the highest moment on the ride. In the front, you'll get a little bit of air. This is really not an airtime focused ride, but there are a few moments of floater airtime. So we start off with this gradual slide to the left and then a little outer bank turn to the right. It's just a brief moment before you continue turning to the left, and then you have a tilted airtime pop. Just a little bit of floater airtime as you gradually continue turning to the left. And this is where things really get interesting. You then roll over into a dive loop. So this is where you would start to build up some serious speed, except you pretty much immediately hit a trim brake, which isn't great. There's actually multiple moments of trims on this ride. I feel like it's because of what I talked about at the beginning of the video. They can't put too much stress on the building. But from a ride experience perspective, that was a little frustrating that every time you'd start to build up some speed, you immediately then slow down. But the roll into the dive loop is fun, and you do get a little bit of hang time. So that was neat, and now you are turning to the right. You gradually rise up, then take a little bit of a harder turn to the right and then level out. There's a slowdown as you then enter the steepest drop on the ride. It's not beyond vertical or even vertical, but man, does it kind of feel that way. It's very small and sudden. I imagine that it is awesome in the back. I wouldn't know. But I've been told it's pretty good. This is where it feels like you hit your fastest moment, this low turn to the right that goes actually right next to the station area. There's another curve as you're turning to the right. That little section there almost reminds me of a Premier ride Spaghetti Bowl. Those rides have similar sensations, but they're a lot faster paced, that's for sure. And then you roll into your final inversion. It's another dive loop. You stall out there for a decent amount of time. You definitely feel that up front. But you take a very controlled free fall back down to the ground. Again, really trimmed to death here. You'll slide under another maintenance bridge, turn to the left, level out, turn to the left again, and then you hit the brakes. One thing I at least appreciate about this ride is even though they are very constricted to this building, they made it so that you don't only turn left. Like, they were creative enough to come up with a layout that allowed for multiple directional changes. And I gotta imagine that had to be pretty challenging. Unfortunately, I still think it's kind of an underwhelming ride. Don't get me wrong, it's one of the better coasters in Dubai. It's very, very cool looking, but I think when you hear Intamin vertical launch coaster, you imagine this pretty intense experience, and to be honest, the ride is kind of forceless. So I was very content with the 3 rides I had. I'm sure if the back was open, then maybe it would have been a different story. And I guess that is an excuse for me to go back one day so I can try that out. But I feel like this is almost an example of a ride that looks better and looks cooler than it actually rides. Which is a shame because you really only get your best views when you're on the coaster. I feel like they needed some better observation decks here. So for the Storm Coaster's final score, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. Looks-wise, it's incredible. Pre-show, awesome. Trains, super comfortable. Layout, it's okay. but I have to give them points on creativity. They clearly had X amount of space to work with, and what they came up with is pretty interesting. I don't think I would have been able to do any better, but it's just not something I'm going to go nuts for, especially since it comes at such a high ticket price. If you're visiting this city, I still 100% recommend you do it. If you have to pick a row out of the ones I experienced, obviously I preferred the front the best. You feel the wind in your face more, and some of the maneuvers feel just a little punchier than in rows like 2 or 3. But I think just realize that this is going to be a bit tamer of an experience. Something you go to check out, be glad you did it, but move on to what's next. And I think if this ride is any indicator, then I'm sure we'll be seeing more vertical launch coasters from Intamin in the future. If this is just the prototype, then you gotta think that the next ones will be even better. So let me know down in the comments below if you've experienced the Storm Coaster at the Dubai Hills Mall, if you agree with the points that I brought up, and of course stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.